Hi and welcome to another Mailbox, and apologies for missing last week, but I was pretty ill, like especially Sunday and Monday, and it basically meant that when I'd missed it, I wasn't able to catch up again. Such is the problems of having to go back to work and therefore having limited time to do things. Some people will have noticed, of course, bringing out loads of videos this weekend because there's loads of stuff I really needed to do, and there's still loads more that I wanted to do, which, if I'm honest, may not get done now. That is unfortunately the problem. But on to the first question here, or first statement, I should say. So most of this is just blah, 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 Ret Paladin stuff. I don't normally do spec-specific stuff in here, but it's towards the end where it says, let's have a look. And if Blizzard can balance it properly up with a case of don't use it if you don't like it, it's talking about talent scores. You say that's kind of dumb, but I like having a couple of playstyle choice talents. It's what allows a class to not feel shoehorned into a style you might not quite like. And I did reply to that, and the reply basically is it's not dumb wanting to be able to choose a talent based on playstyle. What's dumb is believing that you can do. Because Blizzard always have this philosophy, at least publicly, but the thing is, you also believe that they think it privately in the way that they deal with it, because it's not. There's always a talent that's going to be best in a particular situation. However, it is important to note sometimes the difference between the best talent and one that's not so good is about 1%. Now, 1% for someone who wants to get the absolute best out of their spec is important. 1% is worth chasing. However, for a lot of people, if choosing the talent that in theory gives you a 1% benefit, but you lose 5% because you don't play that talent very well, well, that's a pretty good reason for using the talent you want to play. And the same philosophy extends even to spec. So you might be told, for example, if you want to be a mythic raid and you want to do well in that as a rogue, let's say in Tomb of Sargeras, for example, for most of those fights you wanted to play subtlety. Assassination was alright on, like, well, it was decent on Final Avatar. Final Avatar, I kept saying that. Stop it. Fallen Avatar. But generally speaking, you wanted subtlety. Subtlety is a lot more difficult to play. So there's a lot of rogues that just played Assassination. Now, of course, if you can't get a hold of subtlety or you can't put in the amount of practice needed to become good at it, then it is virtually certain that for a lot of those players, they will do more damage as Assassination than they will as subtlety. But is that enough damage to be able to defeat that boss at a reasonable time? Maybe not. And those players have to understand that by not choosing to play the best spec or the best talent, whatever it happens to be, that you are gimping yourself and therefore your raid, if that raid group is focused on progress. If it's not, as it isn't for the vast majority of players, then of course, absolutely, you can feel that there's a choice. So when Blizzard are talking about, oh, you don't like a particular talent, great, choose another one. That is valid for a certain section of the player base. Absolutely. And it is important that different talents do have different play styles for those people as well. But at the same time, when Blizzard are answering questions of this nature, although, you know, the majority of the player base, it's important to make sure that they enjoy the game and access the game. When they're giving those answers, they're giving them ultimately to people who are playing at the more serious end, because those are the people who even tune in and ask those questions or listen to those answers. As Blizzard say themselves, a maximum of 20% of players even look up anything outside of the game. They don't know what's going on outside of the game in terms of Blizzard Q&As or forum posts or anything like that. So that's the answer to that one. So basically, they can't actually make it a genuine choice if you want to eke out the very best from your spec, because in a given situation, there will always be something that's good. My interest in talents is simply this. Do they allow you to choose a set of talents that's going to be good in a particular situation? For myself, it's mostly raiding. I know that, you know, the content I do outside of raiding, I'm not that bothered about pushing it to the limit. You know, when I need to level, I have to level around work anyway, so I'm not about, you know, leveling to level cap in about 8 hours flat. When I'm doing dungeons where I want to do a Mythic Plus dungeon of the highest level to get myself the good item from the weekly cash, I enjoy doing them now and then with people in guild as well, but I'm not going to be pushing it because that's not my thing. Raiding is my thing. That's the one that I want to be able to do as well as I can at any rate, which may not be at the same level as I have done it in the past, but, you know, I want to do it at a certain level. And that means, well, in that situation, I'm going to use that talent because it's best. And I will learn how to use it. You know, if it's one that I don't particularly enjoy, or it's one I'm not particularly good at, I will practice until I'm good enough at it to be able to do my job. Okay, so the next one. So yes, got to 15,000 subscribers. It was a bit of an old grind. It has to be said. Defo the case of quality followers over quantity. I think it must be. I do think it must be. It has to be said. First of all, I still don't know lots about what it takes to get a message out there. All I know is that ultimately the way you get exposure with anything you do on social media, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, it doesn't matter, is by other people sharing it. That's ultimately how it gets around. It's the same with anything. It's just market forces. The way you get your brand, advertised, if you like, is you either pay for that advertising or people do it by word of mouth. Obviously, I'm not going to pay for advertising. So it's ultimately word of mouth. It's people sharing it with others and opening up to wider audiences. Obviously, YouTube can help you out a little bit if you put suitable tags and things like that in. And obviously, what you ideally want to do is, I know that there are videos I could do that would be much more popular and get many more views, and that might have a longer term benefit in terms of getting more people into the channel. But the problem is those sort of videos, not that those sort of videos are not the ones I want to do, it's just that they're much lower priority. Ironically, the ones that will tend to be the most popular are the ones that I don't see as being the premium content, if you want to call it anything, on my channel, and therefore it's lower priority. And because I have to fit everything around work, it always ends up like bottom of the list. And then sometimes I think, when I get a decent amount of time off work, like say Easter's coming up in a few weeks, and I'm going to get 2.5 weeks off then, or summer, 6 weeks off. Although I've got some stuff on this summer that might mean I can't get all 6 weeks to do stuff. Sometimes I'll think to myself, yeah, well, I could just do a load of that. But then there's a little concern. If I do a type of content I don't normally do, just because I now have the time during summer, I have a fear that it would attract a certain number of people who would then not be impressed when it suddenly stops, because it goes back to low priority as soon as I go back to work. And what's worse than, channel growing slowly is it's rapidly expanding and then deflating, because that's much worse, because that's negative growth. That's bad. Even if overall at the end of it you end up with the same number of subscribers you would have before. It just feels bad to see it going backwards. Anyway, back onto World of Warcraft stuff. So it says, don't understand the changes to blood missions. I'm constantly low on resources and use those to keep enough handy for the gold and Antorus missions. Was that really a game-breaking thing? Putting a follower or two on hold for hours to generate a few hundred resources seemed fair to me. Well, what this is about, if you didn't know, is, and I didn't know this, so on the missions in your order hall, there are the Bloods of Sargeras missions. They give you like 4, but the bonus reward apparently is like 8, so you can get 12 altogether. I didn't really realise this. I didn't appreciate it. So, and I didn't put those missions in generally because I have loads of Bloods. So you could get, if you basically obviously send a mission off, it costs a certain amount of order resources. And then when you got them back, those 12 Bloods of Sargeras, if you just traded them in for order resources from the vendor in Dalaran, you got more order resources back than you were spending. Now, onto the issue of, was it game breaking? Did Blizz really have to do it? No, but they do have a habit of doing this. If people play the game in a way that they don't envisage, they do have a habit of preventing it. Sometimes it's valid, of course, because people are circumventing content that they're supposed to be doing. Sometimes not so much. So this is a classic example. Is it game breaking? No. But, we shouldn't be surprised that they have done it, because they will see it as, oh no, you're getting order resources free. We want you to go out and do world quests for order resources. That's what we want you to do. Because remember in WoD, when we had garrison resources, you used to passively get a small number of garrison resources just, each day or every few hours, I think it was. And it could stack up to like 1,000 eventually in that chest. So if I went back to my garrison now, I could open up and get 1,000 garrison resources. There's nothing like that in Legion. They want you to go out and actively do stuff to get them. One of the criticisms with the garrison was that people were just passively doing stuff and it wasn't engaging. So I think that might form part of the thinking as well. But no, it is something to do. And yeah, whether it's right to do it or not, I'd probably say no. My view is It's not game breaking. They could just leave it. It's a little bit like with the zone scaling. So they recently nerfed the experience you get for killing mobs in a dungeon if you're accompanied by someone who could easily solo the place. So in other words, if they're at least 10 levels, I think it is, above the max scaling of that dungeon, then you're going to get way, way less like experience from the mobs. And I think this was to prevent people just dragging someone through stockades time after time after time and just leveling up that way. But again, it's one of those things that if someone wants to do that, is that a big deal? I would say no. I would say let them do it. If they want to grind their way to a particular level, then let them do it. But Blizzard obviously had it with the zone scaling. They wanted to encourage a particular type of behaviour, which is that you level predominantly through questing. You do some dungeons on the side, stuff like that, or whatever, but predominantly through questing. And if people aren't going to do that, then they're going to disincentivise whatever action is preventing them doing that. That's just how they think. On to the next one. Oh, back onto channel stuff. It says, please get help from a designer for your type and design with your videos. No. Again, it comes back to... I know it can look a bit amateurish at times. I have actually worked on my thumbnails. I have tried to improve them. If you look at stuff for the channel over the last 2 years, I think if you jump like several months at a time, hopefully you can notice differences, and I hope they're improvements. But ultimately, it comes down to the following two things. In order to massively improve on them, I would have to learn new skills. Now, I'm all for learning new skills, but then that takes time. And is it time I can really spend when I already spend my time, very enjoyably, by the way. I enjoy doing it. That's why I do it. But I spend my time on my work and then on World of Warcraft itself and other games when I can snatch a few moments. Sorry, my voice is going. And then doing the videos, doing the channel stuff as well. And so, although it might be considered investment, nonetheless, to spend the time really learning those skills, and potentially I might need access to software that can be quite expensive. I've seen examples of software that might look quite good. It's like, oh, I could do really good stuff with that. I'd have to learn it, and it could take hours and hours. I mean, it could take dozens of hours to learn how to do it well. But some of this software is like hundreds of pounds, thousands. And I'm not going to steal software, by the way. I don't use pirated software. If I'm going to use software, I pay for it. So there might be that element to it as well. And it's one of those things, maybe over summer, could I and would I definitely get some benefit from it? Then the other side of it, as you say, they get a designer. Well, that means paying for it. Well, the channel needs to sort of pay for itself at the moment. And I do, I do get things. I got a fairly expensive computer this year, for example. I occasionally get other things. Some of which, if I'm honest, are like toys that I like the look of. And I just come up with an excuse, well, it'll be good for the channel. And maybe it is and maybe it isn't. I just sent off a goodie basket to the developers yesterday. So as far as I'm concerned, the channel's paid for that. That's no generosity on my part. We've all paid for that. For what they did for the Ret Paladins this week. So it's things like that. The channel I sort of determined has to sort of pay for it. I'm not great with money anyway, if I'm honest. I'm not a saver. But it has to sort of pay for itself. And, if you start using designs for this and the other, and all you're actually getting out of videos is a couple of thousand of views usually, it doesn't really become suitable. If you were getting hundreds of thousands of views, then all of a sudden it becomes valid to do it. But then you could argue if it's getting hundreds of thousands of views and you don't have the services of designers to do that, well, you're sort of okay. And there's plenty of YouTubers out there who do get lots of views, and they do it don't even do their own custom thumbnails of any kind. They just stick it on there. They stick a title on there. They just do it. And you know what? Doesn't matter, does it? Because ultimately, the biggest thing, doesn't matter how clever you are at working with the YouTube algorithm, doesn't matter how good you are at posting your stuff everywhere else. Ultimately, the way you get loads of views is by people sharing it with other people, and those people you share it with like it, and they share it with other people as well. And it spreads like that. That is the only way this stuff gets spread out. That is it. That is just purely it. Okay, so... yeah, the answer is no, sorry. We understand the reason though. Yeah, so next one about interview with Peculiar. I quite enjoyed that. I was a little bit surprised that it didn't get as much attention as I thought it would, because I thought it's really interesting finding stuff about, you know, what you can read to data mining. Because it seems odd to me that, you know, if you if you do a video which I haven't done, but if I did do a video comparing a squirrel as you would see it currently in Danasis and a squirrel in Battle for Azeroth, and look at the difference between them, you'd get loads of views. Oh, people are all about, oh, you know, or a hat, a new hat, do a video on a new hat, get loads of views. But you do a video talking to someone who actually manages and curates all this data mining and can read things into it, and we learn about the process of what can you read into data mine stuff in terms of Blizzard's intentions and what you can't, from someone who has contact with Blizzard. You know, I thought people would be really interested in that, and obviously some people were. It didn't do poorly for one of my videos. I just thought it would do better. I didn't think it would get 100,000 views or anything, but you know, I thought it would do better, and that was disappointing. That was disappointing because I really enjoyed that, and it was my first interview. I think I learned some things. First of all, record the interview. That's fairly important. But I would like to do things like that again, but only for things that are relevant to the channel. I don't want to just do random interviews. I'm not seeing myself as, you know, a budding journalist or anything. But yeah, I would enjoy doing those on someone who's got some insight into the sort of stuff that my channel does, I think. Next one, little minor thing with the hunter pet video I did. The original name of the spell was Bloodlust, which dates back to at least Warcraft 3. I don't remember. You may be true. You may be right. I haven't played Warcraft 3 for like 10 years. It says heroism wasn't a thing until WoW, so Bloodlust is fine. Yeah. Not for me, though. Not for me. In fact, when I did join a Horde guild at the end of WoD and into early Legion, I used to annoy them because I would ask them, because especially when I first joined them and I didn't know how they, you know, because I, you know, Hellfire Citadel, you're doing bosses that I'd sort of done with another guild, and I was saying to them, you know, when are you going to use Hero? And they'd be like, don't you mean Lust? No, I don't. Half the time it was Time Warp anyway. You didn't get anything if the sort. It wasn't Shamans that did it. It was usually Mages. But yeah, if I could play Horde for a year and still call it Hero, I ain't calling it Bloodlust or Lust or anything of the kind. So there you go. Sorry about that. I'm not saying I disagree with the fact that it was called Bloodlust first, though, and that the majority of people just call it that, no matter what it's actually called, depending on the class that uses it. But not this one. Next one. So this was to do with bandages. First aid being removed in Battle for Azeroth. It's gone. It's going. No more first aid. It's right there with you. I remember when it was required for vanilla raiding, even for healers, and I remember it being useful. But right now, I don't even know why it exists. None of my characters have it maxed out anymore, and that's really it. I mean, first aid, obviously, what it sounds like, it's something that you use to look after your health, of course. And what do we use to look after our health? Mostly it's healing potions. And in WoD, they did actually, healing potions were prepared using first aid. They sort of took it off alchemists and gave it to first aiders, the ones you'd actually use. And it was pretty good. That looked like they were going to try and make first aid more relevant. And then WoD finished and Legion came in, and healing potions were back in the care of first alchemists and gone from first aid. In fact, now we don't even use the alchemy potions because health stones, warlock health stones, are better for us. Whereas earlier in Legion, they were only really good for the warlock and anyone with a stupid amount of health, usually just tanks. Maybe like Fury Warrior, but usually just tanks. So, yeah, the fact that they moved away from that, I suppose the writing was on the wall. Bandages themselves, I mean, I would think, you know, the fact you have to channel them means it's a no-go in a raid or dungeon environment or any fast-paced content. In PvP, sometimes you can hide behind a wall, can't you, and bandage. I don't know whether that actually does happen these days, but in theory it could. But raids and dungeons, yeah, you're not going to stand there channeling for 8 seconds for a weak heal. And of course, it's got to be a weak heal. You can't be putting healers out of a job. Maybe it would be better if you applied it instantly and it did a hot, so it did its work over 8 seconds, but you didn't channel it, you just cast it. It was just a cast. And again, relatively weak, but maybe the sort of thing that is useful now and then. That would have made it more useful. At the same time, the problem with that is you make it so useful potentially, unless you put a large... Because there always was a debuff timer on it, about 30 seconds. But unless you increase that timer, which I suppose they could, then people are going to feel that they have to use bandages whenever they can, and therefore have to get themselves loads of cloth, which would be a pain in the arse. So, yeah, but at the very least, First Aid needed the healing potions. As soon as they took them away from them at the end of WoD, I think that was it. I think it's curtains. So, but it's going. It's obviously been seen as irrelevant, which it is. And you could argue, why keep it going if it's not useful? If it's not useful, just let it die. And then the next comment also related to First Aid I thought I should put in, because I thought, yeah, I've never really thought about this, but yeah. Always thought it was funny that a bleed would interrupt you bandaging yourself. Because that was the thing with bandaging yourself, 8-second channel, but if you ever took any damage, even from the dots that you're trying to heal up, then it would just instantly stop. The bandaging would stop. And yes, as you said there, funny that a bleed would interrupt you bandaging yourself. Yeah, never considered that. Next comment says, can we talk about what's happening in Legion, or are we just done with this expansion? Well, I would love to. I would absolutely love to. The problem is that Blizzard aren't talking about it. I mean, I can speculate, and there is some speculation that can certainly be talked about, but the major bit of speculation, which again was a video I was going to do, but maybe I will, maybe I won't, because it's just fallen down the list now, is something based upon Battle for Azeroth Alpha. But obviously that was spoilers. I'm not going to talk about it here. But all we can do is speculate about what's coming. Like, all the way through Legion, we've known. As soon as a patch has come out, it's been like about a week. What they've usually done is put a Q&A on to say what's coming next, and to say that the PTR will be up in a couple of weeks. Well, patch 7.3.5 has been out for several weeks now. The focus is very much on BFA, simply because we've got sources of information. There are people in the alpha, myself included, who can, and we've got regular content coming in patched form every week so far, and we've got no information about what's still to come. Blizzard haven't done a Q&A on what's still to come in Legion. They haven't put anything on the PTR in terms of what's come to Legion. So all we're doing is making stuff up. And I don't really like making stuff. I like speculating if there's something to pin it on. I don't just like coming up with random stuff. Like, for example, oh, Dread O'Rourke's will be Alliance. Really? Really? No. That's the last one. So this one is to do with feedback. Now, this is a bugbear of mine. It was something I think I tried to encourage people to do in the Legion Alpha. Didn't succeed. I really want to do a better job in the Battle for Azeroth Alpha. So it comes to this. So the question is, Blizzard ignores all feedback that isn't trending on Reddit or Twitter. Don't pretend all those general discussion feedback, which is pages worth, hundreds of posts, hundreds of likes, actually get addressed at all or even responded to. Here's a recent one, blah, 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 PvP stuff. The majority, of course, will not get responded to. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not brought to their attention. One thing that's guaranteed, if a post gets a lot of engagement, it will be brought to the attention of developers. They might immediately ignore it. You're quite right. They may immediately ignore it. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. The only feedback they are guaranteed to ignore is the feedback that is never given. The way you need to look at it is this. Some people, well, a lot of people will say there's no point in giving feedback because they don't listen to it anyway. And it's true that Blizzard are not really looking for feedback. Even with the people in the BFA Alpha, what are they really after is stuff working. You know, they want bug reports because they don't want the game to go live with lots of bugs in it. And the odd one's bound to sneak through. Some of which will be ones that we're reporting right now that just won't ever get fixed. Or not until it's gone live and everyone shouts about it. But that's ultimately what they want. They want people to test stuff as well, sure. And that's not to say they ignore all feedback either, because some of the feedback actually does resonate with them, and they'll do that. But the majority of it, sure, even if it's well thought out, and even if when it goes live we end up being right, as was the case in Legion and in WoD and every other expansion since, and will be the case in BFA. But it is important to give that feedback for a number of reasons. First of all, it doesn't actually take very long. You know, even to do what you would call a long post, right? The posts I've been putting in are several paragraphs long. that didn't actually take me that much to write. I like to think that I thought about what I was going to write before I wrote it, but the fact of the matter is it didn't take me very long to construct those posts. So it doesn't take very long to respond. And in fact, the feedback can be as little as upvoting a comment you agree with on the forums. I also do that. Or it could be just adding a little comment of support on, because that's even better. Upvoting a comment you agree with and then responding yourself that, yes, even if you just say something like this, I agree with this exactly. It's always better to add your own thing into it as well. But even just saying that does a couple of things. First of all, it extends the length of the post. And then it also bungs it back to the top. It's something you think is important. Why wouldn't you want it put back at the top? So that's one thing. It doesn't actually take very much time and effort. The second reason is if you get a lot of people who are wanting a particular thing, then even if it's ignored through development and it all goes live, then you've built up a certain amount of momentum to at least get it addressed fairly quickly after it goes live. Because what Blizzard may be hoping, there may be a couple of reasons. One, it may be that they totally believe in what they've come up with and that we are just the small number, a very noisy minority. And then when it goes live, the majority, the silent majority, will be delighted with it. And when that turns out not to be the case, it's a bit like, oh, okay, we might have to pause for thought here. Secondly, it may just be that even if they tacitly agree with what we're saying, they've run out of development time to fix it now, and maybe they'll fix it during the expansion. So you're just keeping the pressure on. You're just keeping it on there that, you know, we want to do that. The other reason is there will always be on forums White Knights and Trolls. The White Knights will always support the status quo. They will support what Blizzard are doing. You know, Blizzard can state something. It's a bit like, let's give an example, Ret Paladin example. So we've got Hammer of Wrath back. Brilliant. It's an execute. It didn't have to be an execute. And the execute is just one aspect of that ability. They could have removed the execute and it would still be a welcome return. But it is an execute and it's come back. In Legion, Blizzard said Paladins can't have an execute because execute is a warrior thing. Even though there are other classes that have executes as well. But nonetheless, a load of them lost them. It wasn't just Ret Paladins that lost them. So it was removed because it's an execute. But now it's back. The same people who would have defended Blizzard saying, yeah, well, execute is a warrior ability, you know, and therefore Paladins shouldn't have it. Those same people will now be going, because Blizzard brought it back, oh yeah, it's a fantastic spell. Thanks, Blizzard. Well done. It's like, those people will always exist. Then you will always get the trolls. These are the people who will just be contrary all the time. They will just say the game is bad. This is bad about the game. And they will also, you know, what do you call it? Transpose? I don't know. Psychologists probably got a word for it. All their angst about it onto everyone else. So anyone that leaves the game ever, that's the reason. The thing I don't like about the game is the reason why all these other people are leaving as well. And they'll make out that millions are leaving the game because, of course, no one knows how many people are playing the game now at all. And those people exist as well. So the only way to get rational debate is to outnumber them. You have to massively outnumber the number of trolls and White Knights. And if the vast majority of reasonable players engaged on the forum, you would inevitably drown them out. Couldn't be helped. But of course, that would have an added consequence that lots of posts would get lots of comments. And then people will be going, oh, why aren't they responding to all of them? Well, they haven't got time, to be fair. Some of them they don't want to respond to as well. It's not always about time. And then the other reason is simply this. The last reason why you should engage on the forums and you should make your comments known. Your thoughts known, I should say. It's this. If your feedback is completely ignored, you at least get the warm glow inside from being able to hold aloft a giant banner a year later that says, I told you so. Everyone knows that saying I told you so is not a particularly positive trait in a person, but everyone secretly loves it when they get to say it. You know, that's why you don't go along tacitly agreeing with what Blizzard are saying by not opposing it if they're doing something you don't like. When they're doing something you do like, again, it's important to say so. And that's another thing. Little experiment here. Little experiment. So, again, to do with Ret Paladins, but you don't need to be a Ret Paladin to appreciate this. I have posted something on the Paladin forums on both NA and EU last week and this week. Last week's was some things that I wanted. You know, it was not direct criticism of Blizzard, but it was things that were bad about Legion that I would like fixed for BFA, please. Very detailed, or very specific at least. And, you know, and I did a video saying, could you please support this? But only if you agree. I don't want people supporting me on things they don't agree with. And loads of people did. Quite a lot of people did. I'd hope for, you know, as we get some momentum, more people, but loads of people did. Then I posted something which is much more praiseworthy. Basically, I'm just praising it. I'm not criticising at all. I made a post saying, thanks very much, this is absolutely fantastic. And again, I've asked people to support that. Now, and some people have, and thank you very much for that. But far fewer. And I'm not comparing, obviously, you know, the post I did a week ago, obviously, has had a week's worth of posts. I'm talking about when it's been out for the same amount of time, the initial momentum, because I made a point of noting it down. And there's far more willingness to go onto the forums and support something where I'm asking for something than simply a post where I'm saying, thanks very much, we like this, can we keep up the good work? And it's because people are... They will spend even a small amount of time, and they'll spend even a lot of time in criticising something or asking for something, but very rarely will spend any time at all in praising someone or saying thanks very much. For example, you know, if, let's say, you went into a shop and you had bad customer service, like really bad, not the sort of thing you wanted to shrug off, you have some people will just put up with it, but there will be some people who will make a complaint. They'll just say that wasn't good enough, and they'll write a letter of complaint or ask to see the manager and talk to them or whatever. How often, though, do you go to a shop or benefit from some other service where you get especially good customer service? Like, I mean, someone has gone clearly above and beyond. They're not just doing their normal job, they've gone above and beyond to help you out. How many times, if we're honest, do we write a letter of praise or ask to speak to their manager and commend them? Not as often. We're relieved that we've got the extra good service. Thank you very much. We've thanked the person, I hope. But then it's been left there. That's just how we are. But maybe it's not how we should be. So anyway, that's enough moralising for this week. Thanks very much for watching the Mailbox. I'll be back again next week, I hope, as long as I'm not ill. If you've liked it, don't forget to like the video itself, share with other people, comment down below. Until next time, I'll see you later.